Good evening, and thanks for joining this session about the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework and its impact on Broadheath. We're going to start by looking at what is the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, the GMSF. It's the strategy for jobs and homes which covers every district in Greater Manchester. And it's supported and underpinned by a number of other documents, including for each district a local plan. Trafford's local plan is being updated at the moment, and we believe it will come out for consultation soon. There are also other documents that underpin this strategy, such as the Greater Manchester Transport Strategy, the Clean Air Plan, the 5-year Environment Plan. So lots of documents make up the overall picture. In fact, when the GMSF was released on the 23rd of October, over 150 documents were released. 14,000 pages, a lot to read. For most residents, though, reading the new Carrington Master Plan, or if you're interested more in Timperley Wedge, then the Timperley Wedge Plan will be sufficient to give you some indication of what's going to happen locally. If you want to easily find that new Carrington Master Plan, go to our website, friendsofcarringtonmoss.com. You'll find a page dedicated to the GMSF, and the links to all the documents are there, including the new Carrington Master Plan. Now, we want to just mention here at the beginning that although we're going to be talking about how bad the plan is, which it is, we do want to make recognition that Trafford has made a number of improvements to the previous draft of the GMSF. For example, in 2016, there were 16,000 houses proposed on Carrington Moss. In 2019, that had gone down to 7,500. Now in 2020, it's 5,000. So very welcome news, especially as the amount of greenbelt that's going to be released has also been reduced. Still too much release, so we're still talking about 150 hectares of greenbelt that's going to be released, but it's good news that it's been reduced from the 240 hectares that it was going to be last year. The other bit of good news is that there's much more emphasis in this plan about the environment, the ecology, the biodiversity on Carrington Moss, and we do see that all as very positive. However, Trafford declared a climate emergency 2 years ago, and they were followed by every other district in Greater Manchester, along with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the health authorities. Yet we don't believe the climate emergency and appropriate action plans to support action against the climate emergency are reflected well in this document, in the GMSF as a whole, nor in the new Carrington Master Plan. Still a massive overdevelopment in the area. So, you know, we need to do some more work on that climate emergency action plan and how the new Carrington transformation strategy can support it. There should also be a lot more emphasis on social housing, which, let's face it, is the housing crisis. And we're disappointed to find a very selective application of the policies within the GMSF in the different allocations. So New Carrington, for example, cannot be classed as sustainable today, and we don't believe it's sustainable going forward. And one of the reasons for that is history. The current Trafford plan is a mix of the Core Strategy 2012 and the Unitary Development Plan 2006. In both of those documents, Carrington, Partington and Sale West were identified as regeneration areas, and as a consequence were promised improvements to public transport. Those improvements haven't been delivered. In fact, the converse has happened. We've had a reduction in public transport in these areas. So we've got no assurance whatsoever that the new Carrington Master Plan will result in a sustainable transformation. But just before we go into any more detail about New Carrington itself, let's just look at what we are able to comment on in this consultation. Of course, we can say whatever we like in our responses, but the government and the inspector who's going to look at these representations that we make is going to be looking at whether we're pointing out that the plan is not sound. And how can we do that? Well, to be sound, the plan has to be deliverable. It has to align with the policies, not just in the GMSF, but in the National Planning Policy Framework. For it to be deliverable, there would have to be sufficient school places identified in Trafford to accompany 5,000 family homes. We're not sure that there are. For it to be sound, it would have to demonstrate that there was no other brownfield sites that could have been delivered, made available for development, rather than releasing Greenbelt. We believe there are other brownfield sites, and we also believe that windfall sites will come available as a consequence of office space no longer being needed post-COVID, because many people across Greater Manchester will continue to work from home in the future. There is a timetable which may change. We don't think now that all the different authorities in Greater Manchester will have approved the plan by the end of November. So it is possible that this public consultation date will be put back. That 8-week consultation will go ahead, and then the plan will be prepared for submission to the government, and the plan as it stands will be sent along with any representations or responses to the consultation that have been received by the public. They'll be examined by the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State, and there will be a public examination, so we will be able to have our say at a public inquiry about the GMSF. And ultimately then, once all of those actions have been agreed, then the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework will be adopted by all 10 local authorities. Why are we concerned? Well, the aim in the new Carrington Master Plan says it's to transform the allocation area into a sustainable location. It isn't currently a sustainable location, as I said before, and we don't believe the plans will turn it into a sustainable location. For example, the only commitment in the transport strategy is to a new road. No commitment to public transport. It's going to be encouraged. There's going to be business cases written, but there's no commitment to additional public transport. We think one of the big issues about this plan will be a massive increase to air and noise pollution and a huge potential for flooding in the area, particularly here in Sale West. This area where these crossroads are here was under a significant amount of water between October 2019 and March 2020, and that happens frequently. And this area here was also under a lot of water, so much so that it was actually lapping onto the elevated footpaths. So, you know, this is not inches of water, it's feet of water that we're talking about. It makes a lot of, and they've coloured a lot of areas green. It's not actually green. There is United Utilities down at the bottom here. It's not green and it's not accessible by the public. Man United Training Ground, not green and not accessible by the public. Carrington Riding Centre, although it's a riding centre, it's not accessible by the general public. The National Grid land, again, quite a big area, not accessible by the public. Then when this road goes in, there's talk of it being a dual carriageway. That won't be green, and it won't be, we might be lucky if we can get across it. And then up at this area here, is Sale Sharks training ground, another riding centre, Sale Rugby FC's training ground. So actually, it's a bit disingenuous to suggest that this is a green corridor. It isn't anything of the sort. So let's just take a look more closely at Broadheath. Broadheath. So what does it mean particularly to the people of Broadheath? Well, I know that you are concerned about the flooding, and I know that there are concerns about the trees in the coverts here near Broadheath. It's my understanding that they're not at risk, Malia's covert, but we believe that the tree cover on Carrington Moss will remain. But obviously more information is needed before we can verify that. We do, though, think that you will be impacted by increased traffic and therefore increased air pollution. What we should remember is that not only are there these 1,450 homes here in Sale West, there's also another 250 that have already been approved. And all of those homes will be looking to come out on Fursway here, come down the A56 and will impact traffic in Broadheath. In addition, there's these other roads that are going to come across, particularly this Southern Link Road. And what we should remember is that not only are there 2,600 homes in Partington as part of this allocation, which is the area that's inside the red outline, but in Partington itself, a further 850 homes have already been submitted as planning applications. So, you know, we are talking actually, when you add these extra homes on that are outside the allocation area, at around 6,000 homes in the area, not 5,000. There are things that we need to think about very carefully. This allocation down here, SR2D, for example, is United Utilities land, which is currently the home of the willow tit. It's one of the most endangered birds in the world. So for that habitat to be being destroyed for housing, you know, is really a bit scandalous. We feel that there are a lot of other issues that need to be taken into consideration, but for Broadheath, we feel that the biggest issues are those outlined here. So the traffic, the air pollution, the loss of green space, the potential risk of flooding as more water goes into Sunderland Brook and Stamford Brook. You know, so that lots of issues, and there may be issues about school places as well. So that's something that more work needs to be done on. So where do we go from here, guys? Well, we, the Friends of Carrington Moss, have an idea. What we're suggesting is that we need to look at alternative transformation strategies for Carrington Moss. Because actually, Carrington Moss is helping Trafford not to be at the bottom of this biodiversity units table. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. Greater Manchester commissioned an organisation to review the natural habitat across Greater Manchester, and Trafford came out second bottom. Now, that isn't a surprise to me because Trafford actually has the lowest proportion of green belt in the whole of Greater Manchester, other than the city areas of Manchester and Salford, who you can see are very close to us at the bottom of this table. So these biodiversity units, you know, we are there at 40,000. Oldham is at the top of the table with 140,000. And even Tameside, which is comparable to Trafford in both terms of size and population numbers, is more than double our biodiversity units. Now, only Carrington Moss, if you look at the biodiversity units by ward, Carrington Moss is one of the reasons that Trafford isn't at the very bottom of this table. So if you imagine if the new Carrington Master Plan had been developed, had been done already, delivered already, we'd be at the bottom of this table. And that's not where we should be. We shouldn't be releasing more greenbelt when we need the greenbelt to help us to increase biodiversity units in Trafford. So what to do about this? Well, we're working with parish councils, other community groups. We'd love to work with you guys in Broadheath as well to look at community-focused plans for the area. So we're looking at a transport strategy that focuses on public transport, on traffic calming, not building new roads, although we are suggesting a bridge across the Ship Canal rather than building a road across Carrington Moss. We're also suggesting an alternative housing and industrial pipeline. So looking at where that brownfield land is in Trafford and where it might be, so the potential windfall sites that might come along as a consequences of offices no longer being needed. So we're looking at that alternative pipeline. And then the other thing that we're looking at is to create a restoration strategy for Carrington Moss. What we want to do with Carrington Moss is turn it into a place that will make money for landowners, because the people who own Carrington Moss are make money for them without concreting it over. And we think there are ways that they can do this by selling biodiversity units, by selling carbon units to businesses, to other developers, offsetting biodiversity net gain requirements elsewhere, because there are new government requirements in the latest environment strategy, National Environment Strategy, that will require developers to be able to demonstrate a 10%, a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain. We can do that in Carrington Moss. So let's turn it into something that's really beneficial for the owners, for the community, and for the wildlife and birds, and restore that irreplaceable habitat that is Carrington Moss. So that's our vision. We're moving towards that by holding a number of public meetings to which you are all invited. We'd be delighted to see you there. Our next meeting is on the 28th at 10 o'clock in the morning. We start with a draw of our 200 club. Look at our website. There is a page dedicated to our 200 club. We put 45% of the money that we get from the 200 club back into prizes. 55% of the money we use to buy specialist advice to help us with the plans that we're making for Carrington Moss. The cost is only £2 per month. And we do a special offer if you buy a year's worth of tickets at a time of £22, so you get a month free. Have I sold it to you yet? So hopefully you'll all join our 200 club. On Saturday, we'll be doing a quick update on those alternative options that I mentioned. We'll then break out into two working groups. One will look at public transport requirements for all the areas around Carrington Moss. The other will look at how Carrington Moss can support Trafford's Climate Emergency Action Plan. The groups will then swap over, so everybody will have the opportunity of being in both groups, and then we'll come back together and close. And we would really welcome you there. We need local knowledge at these meetings so that we can make our plans more community focused. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time to listen. We hope you'll sign up with us, whether on Facebook or Twitter, or go to our website and ask to be added to our email circulation list. We look forward to hearing from you again. If you need any more information or you've got any questions, Carolyn Dean is going to coordinate all of those for me. So do send any questions to Carolyn. Back to you as soon as we can. And I'm sorry about the noise from the budgie in the background. Thank you very much.